of this is in Jamestown, with the bulk of the project being in Ellicott, that we still have to approve the environmental assessment form and the site plan, subject to an easement if the city goes ahead and sells the property. And there were two issues related to the easement. One is the BPU gas line, which is one of the reasons I asked Chris Selston to join us. And then what was the other issue with the easement with the city, Crystal?
The Riverwalk right of way.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
For some reason, I went blank on the Riverwalk. I don't know why. Okay, so Crystal, did you want to make a staff recommendation before we hear from the project sponsors?
Sure. So the staff recommendation is to approve the project and the site plan. I know there are some questions, which is great that Chris Selstrom's able to join us. Just some clarifying things that we need to, and Andy, we've chatted a bit about this back and forth. So the staff recommendation is to approve, and with a recommendation, I guess, for the Planning Commission to go ahead and recommend the sale to council. And that easement agreement is an important piece of this. You know, we want to ensure that we've got the ability to carry on the Riverwalk and make sure that it's able to extend beyond its current ending spot, which is at Clifton Avenue. We know that there are a number of plans in the works for some the county greenway initiative. And so we just want to make sure that we're able to carry on that Riverwalk and extend it. So with that, I don't know, Greg, if you want to.
So it would be subject to an easement with respect to the Riverwalk and the BPU gas line.
Yes, yes.
So why don't we hear from the project sponsors, if you would.
Sure. This is Andy Johnson here, and Andy and Carrie, the two of us are going to kind of present to you guys. I'm the site civil engineer involved, and Carrie's the architect that designed the buildings. So her and I, along with the owner, Marlon, and Linda and Andrew Finson, have been spearheading the project. And I mainly did all the site plan review stuff, and Carrie did the building plans, and we've submitted both of those to you guys, along with the application for site plan review and some other supporting documentation. I thought I would just start kind of with the big picture view that, you know, that I think almost everybody agrees that this is a great project. You know, it fits with the vision for the county and the city. And we're all really excited about it and appreciate you guys working us into your busy schedule so we can hopefully get this approved and keep the momentum going that we've already created, or that the owners created, I should say. So to describe the project briefly, Marlon and his team have been restoring the old marina for the last 2 years, from 2018 to 2020. He basically resuscitated the old LS Aero Marina, which, as most of you may know, was kind of in shambles and literally falling apart. And there was some environmental stuff that was all cleaned up, and the owner did an exceptional job. As you can see, if you haven't been by yet, the 3 buildings have completely been restored. We worked with the DEC and the Army Corps to permit all the shoreline work. We installed a new boat haul out pit. You know, these buildings are really unique too, because they're heated storage buildings, and there's storage needs on the lake. So it's fulfilling a local need that way too, in addition to you know, providing a spot for ecotourism and renting pontoon boats and outdoor recreation, active lifestyle, and all that good stuff. So that's kind of the where the project's at now, and so he's restored those areas, and it's gaining traction. People have been using it, and Now he's at the point where the economics can justify, to some extent anyway, him wanting to expand and build 4 new buildings. And that's the subject and the purpose of this meeting here, is the marina expansion project. And so I'd like to direct your attention to figure 3, the ortho photo. That's kind of the satellite view of the whole property. The property is outlined in red on it. And we give the acreages on there, and we show the town of Ellicott and city of Jamestown line with a yellow dashed line there. Greg, as you had mentioned earlier, Jamestown owns a piece of the pie. It literally looks like a triangular piece of pie there. It's 0.43 acres out of the greater 4.78, which is in the town of Ellicott. Well, 4.78 total minus the 0.43 that's in Jamestown. So just to kind of give you a look of the overall layout, and then you'll also notice the city of Jamestown right away that we've been talking about, sort of that smooth arc that goes through the middle. So the area that is the focus of this conversation is in that area right along Fluvanna Road. And I might direct your attention now to C1, which is our marina expansion existing, is our site plan. It's the existing site plan. So the new project area is going to encompass about 3/4 of an acre is what he'll need to disturb. That's the new expansion area. And again, we show the town of Ellicott, city of Jamestown line on that sheet. So that's the existing conditions. Again, all the stuff on the lower part of that drawing is stuff that was already done from 2018 to 2020. So if you wanted to go to C2 is the location plan. That shows the 4 new buildings that the owner wants to install next. And as you can see on there, we kind of showed, what we want to do immediately now, which, we realized that 2 of those buildings, the two out of the 4 that are located to the south, are actually just over the line of the city of Jamestown right-of-way property that they own. It's a property that they own that Greg was mentioning earlier. We're trying to sell, or we want to try to buy from Jamestown, in the process of trying to transfer that over. And so we can't build those buildings just yet. And the owner doesn't intend to build those 2 buildings this year anyway. He wants to save those until next year or the following year, after he gets more revenue going off the first 2. The first 2 he wants to build now this year, immediately pretty much, if he gets the approvals here, are the 2 along the road. They're nearest the road. And you can see how we how we kind of showed how much of the building is in the city of Jamestown and how much is in the town of Ellicott. We kind of hatched it to help direct your eyes. And so you can kind of see, one of the top left building is completely in the town of Ellicott, but the top right building, a little over half of it's in the town of Ellicott, and the other approximate half is in the city of Jamestown, hence the need for the coordinated review and so forth. So just wanted to kind of clarify that to the rest of the audience that may not have heard the backstory with this. So that's really all I wanted to explain initially, is just kind of the purpose, the goals, the intent, kind of the schedule, what he's got done already. Everything else on this drawing is basically the grading plan, stormwater plan, parking, all that's all on here. And we basically went through the site plan review checklist to ensure that we've addressed all those things. And so before I ramble on too much here, I could also maybe pass the mic to Carrie. And Carrie, maybe you could tell them a little bit about your building plans.
Well, the building, basically, these are just storage buildings. So unlike the previous 3 buildings, they're pretty basic, 38 feet by 116 foot pole barn structure. One has heated storage, so there's radiant floor heat. And I believe that Marlin already has quite a huge number of interested participants here for storage. So it does look like it's a really viable thing for this area. So we have the 4 buildings all facing the center, and there's a 50-foot drive coming in the center where they'd have the appropriate room to turn the boats around and maneuver the trailers into the buildings. So just that single access coming in for all 4 buildings. And all 4 buildings are basically the same, except the one in the upper right, we did draw it as a 70-foot building plus an addition, so that if we needed to only build a section right now, we could do that until further approvals. So, but that's about it. I don't know what questions you might have for us.
Well, thank you. Let's see if anyone from the commission has questions for either Andy or Carrie.
Right now, you'd like to build the main building on the south side, including the addition.
We would
That's
prefer
the goal.
to, but if we need to, we can build that as a 70-foot building and do the addition later on.
No, I was just curious on what
Yeah,
the,
but we
the
would prefer to if we can get the
primary
approval.
goal is.
Yeah.
And as for clarification, the city council is going to need to modify the right-of-way for the gas line in order for this to go forward. Correct?
Where does the gas line run now?
The gas line, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
The gas line runs through the parking area. It's a yellow line on the map. I'm not sure if I have the same document you guys are looking at, but we're working on with the team here to get a proper easement done for that, as well as to service the wastewater treatment facility, or it's actually just a pump station that's down in the southern bottom right of the corner. We need to make sure that we have access and capabilities to feed that electrically and also go and service that station. So one of my questions that I didn't ask earlier today in our conversations was whether or not the existing gravel driveway on the far right, the east end, if that would be remaining or if that's going away in the long term.
No, that's remaining.
Okay, so if we draw the easement for access to the waste pump station right down that road, is that a good place for that?
I believe it is. Marlon, are you on the call?
No, I do not believe Marlon is here. No.
Okay, well, you can let me know. We just need to make sure either we get access via that way or via your new road. Either one I think would work for us.
Right. As of now, we have no plans to change that. And I don't see that happening in the future. I don't know if it might get widened slightly someday, but that's about it.
Okay. So I think we can come up with those. The BPU is gonna draft an easement to cover all of that. So we should be okay there.
So to get it clear in my head, is the sale, if we recommend the council to approve it, subject to 2 different easements? One for the Riverwalk and one for the BPU gas line, or is it combined in one easement?
Right now, Greg, we have the whole property is the city's.
Right.
We would be limiting what we would be maintaining as easements and selling off, in theory, the rest of it.
The gas pipeline is partially in the city-owned property, but it also goes through their property. Also, the electric service to the pump station goes through their property too. So I think, at least from the BPU perspective, it might be cleaner to have one easement for the gas pipeline, the wastewater line, the electric lines, and all the utility stuff, and then maybe a separate easement from the city for the Riverwalk portion.
I would agree.
Okay, and if and when we get to the point of recommending the sale, I'll state it that it's subject to potentially 2 easements, but that can be worked out then. Once the city council decides to go ahead with it. Did anybody else have a question about the project or anything to do with it?
Is there any change to the Riverwalk? That's on Urbana Avenue, correct? Right at that point, or I know there's a section that comes up behind it from Clifton, it stops, and then, so, and it came up earlier, I just wonder, I don't see anything on the map about the Riverwalk.
It stops at Clifton, Tom.
Yeah, it's not going to continue.
It
In
could
front.
potentially in the future continue, but right now it doesn't. It's DNS classes in between. this
Right.
and-
And we do show a proposed 10-foot easement there for the Riverwalk to go through. It's just in front of the 4 buildings.
Right.
In the event that it does someday run through that property.
Does
Yeah,
that,
it'd be great to see that happen.
yeah, does that easement go all the way to the western property line of,
Yeah.
of your property line?
Yes, it does.
And then beyond that, does the city, are you asking to sell just the portion of the city property that's contained in your parcel, or are you also looking for the rest of it going west?
I think we're looking for all of it going west to the end of the last property that Mr. Yonker just purchased, which is the former Kapuzinski property. So that none of his properties would be divided between the upper lot and the lake lot.
Be on that figure 3, if you look at that, it's easier to kind of picture it. And Greg, just a quick side that Jamestown was adamant about, maintaining that old railroad track grade. We initially were thinking of splitting the Riverwalk around it, but when we met with Jeff and Mickey and others from Jamestown, Crystal, they explained that they wanted it to maintain that flat, smooth, alignment and elevation the whole way and be consistent around. So we were mindful of that and decided to keep that on the plan that way. Wanted to mention that.
Any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Okay, well then, could I get a motion to approve the environmental assessment form?
So moved.
Is that you, Mike?
Yep.
My head was down for a minute. Thank you. Could I have a second, please?
Second,
That was you, John?
yes.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion approved. Could I get a motion to approve the site plan?
With conditions?
Oh, yes. Well, the conditions would, you're referring to the easements or?
With conditions of getting the easements in place prior to final approval?
Right, because then we'll have to have another vote to recommend the sale subject to the easements, but we can have a motion. Were you making that motion, Jeff?
Good.
Okay, so you're making a motion to approve the site plan subject to the easement being worked out, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. And then the third part is recommending to the city council that the land that the city of Jamestown owns be sold subject to the easements to be worked out, protecting the right of way for the Riverwalk and the BPU utilities. Can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Lehman. Can I have a second?
Second,
Moved by Mr. Lyman Kuso. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Thank you very much. Look forward to the project being built.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Thanks, everybody. Jeff,
Right.
Chris,
Thank you.
Gentleman Lawson.
take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The party just got smaller. So we'll move on to the second issue, the local law providing for rezoning of tattoo parlors. And Crystal, you were going to make a staff recommendation, I believe.
Yes, thank you. Staff recommends that the planning commission take a look at the local law regarding tattoo parlors and allowed locations. We've discussed this in the past. It was actually brought to us by Chairperson Ellen DeTanto of the Zoning Board of Appeals back in October, I believe, of 2019. It had been something that we had discussed taking a look at previously. It has, of course, with COVID and the situation with us not meeting regularly as much and all of the things that go with that, it was sort of put on the back burner, but we are hoping that we can get that back on in front of you, and we would like to recommend approval of changing the allowed zoning areas.
So we have a copy of the proposed local law that would obviously have to be passed by council.
Yep.
And it says the code should be amended to strike and remove subsection M, tattoo parlors, and then the code would be amended to add subsection 20, reading tattoo parlors. So in effect, that means that tattoo parlors would be allowed in those zones that they previously have been prohibited from operating in. And I think that's mentioned in the discussion under the background.
Correct. So currently they were limited to zoning districts CM, LM, and M.
Right.
So we are requesting they be allowed in district C4, C3, C2, C1, and RC, which they're currently not allowed.
Right. And did we want to keep the language as tattoo parlors? I thought, I mean, I'm not sure that makes any real difference. It just, I think we were discussing how these are more tattoo artists that would be compatible with especially activities downtown. And I don't think it matters a whole deal if we keep it as parlors, but I want to make it clear that what we're approving here, not that there's anything wrong with the tattoo parlor, it's just that my understanding is that the person who got the zoning variance turned down sees herself as an artist who was going to be doing this by appointment. So the way this is written, would that still be the case, or could somebody just go and open a tattoo parlor that would be open without appointment? That's my question. So it's broad enough to encompass both. I think I see Elliot shaking his head yes, but.
Yeah,
General tattoo parlors.
Yeah.
Say what?
It's general as written right now to tattoo parlors.
Yeah.
We could obviously add body modification to those as well. I was just thinking.
Well, I just didn't want to hem ourselves in with a definition that might be too narrow or too broad. So, I mean, that's just a question I have. I don't know if I have an answer to it, but, and also would like to see what other members of the commission as well as our council liaison feels about this.
Yeah, could you just include it? Could you just say tattoo artists and or parlors? I'm going back to that meeting we had before, and I'm trying to recall who the speaker was and what they called tattoo parlors. It was.
Well, I believe
refer to it as a salon.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the questions is, do we want to change tattoo parlors into something broader?
Mm-hmm. Tattoo
artists and Elliot, you said something about behavior. I'm not behavior. Body modification. I'm thinking of psychology here. Maybe we need behavior modification.
Yes.
I could use a body modification myself. But
well, we're just getting a little older. I could probably use behavior modification. I'm just wondering if we want to broaden that. So it's broader than tattoo parlors. I don't know, Elliot, do you have a recommendation?
I would recommend to broaden it.
Yeah.
To include
Piercings.
piercings, artists of that nature. As far as the proper wording for it, I don't know at this moment what that is. I'd favor it being all encompassing rather than narrowing.
Yeah, I'm just worried that tattoo parlors might be misconstrued and could be too narrow. And so I suppose we could make this recommendation subject to the language that you could work out to make it broader. Unless somebody feels the opposite.
It came up the other night in the council meeting. There seems to be a pretty, a consensus around allowing them in those areas and those, like you said, the C1, 2, 3, and 4, especially, they seem like they really belong there. I didn't really, the multifamily residential, I don't know. That's one area I might have a question about, but I'm trying to picture where that would be. But they're obviously more accepted now and more of a regular everyday thing than 20 years ago.
Almost as many tattoo parlors or salons as there are hair salons these days in some communities.
No, you're right. You're right. And I don't want to put any additional limits on them. It's a business that's growing and it belongs downtown for sure. And that's a feeling I got from the rest of the council.
Yeah, and obviously the council would still have to approve this because all we can do is make a recommendation, which is required. But you do quote some interesting statistics about how much, the yearly revenue industry in the U.S. $1.5 billion, 13% annual market growth rate. 3 out of every 10 Americans have at least one tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
So that means if I look at our group, I see 12 people. That means 3 of us at least have tattoos. Don't worry, I won't ask who. I'll just tell you it's not me.
I mean, that leaves Jeff, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
He's got one for each of us.
I bet. Don't show us right now, Jeff. It's okay.
So, any other questions or comments from anyone? Concerns from the commission?
Yeah, I would just mention that it doesn't look like tattoo parlor is defined in the zoning code.
No,
So maybe there's an opportunity to make some sort of broad definition for, the only thing I could think that came to my mind was body artist or something like that.
That might be the term they used.
Yeah.
John, you might be right. That's, I think, when they were, and I forgive me, I can't remember the lady's name that spoke to the planning commission. It was several months ago, but that might be body artist is what she called herself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so then I take it, John, you would recommend also that we recommend that whatever we call this also be defined in the zoning code, because right now it's not there.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess we would have to turn that over to Elliot to find the proper wording.
Yeah, myself and Ben.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be a relatively easy thing to accomplish. And it's always good to have kind of that clarifying language in the zoning code, because a lot of the things that are listed there are still undefined. So
Right.
I think it really limits space for any argument by having it properly defined. And it should be easy enough to put a definition of that nature together.
So then we would be recommending the change in the zoning law to add districts where these places are allowed, and recommend that these places be defined in the zoning code consistent with our discussion this afternoon, if I heard everyone correctly. That sound right to the commission?
Yes.
And everybody else?
Yep.
There's a,
Oh, sure.
no, I'm just thinking about the multifamily residential, and there is some locations in the city that are sort of on the boundaries of the city, and I just wasn't sure if that's intentional or not. They're sort of scattered. I know Tom mentioned that going into multifamily residential for businesses. I'm not really concerned about it. I'm just curious as to how those are zoned.
I guess I can speak to that. So the multifamily residential also, despite being called that, includes essentially neighborhood commercial entities. Most notably hair salons, which we thought was a pretty good parallel in terms of impact on a neighborhood, in terms of how it impacts the surrounding. It's relatively low number of people. You're not going to see 40 cars lining up out front at a time. So I think when Elliot and I sat down and discussed this initially, the reason we put it there was we saw the, I guess, greatest parallel to a tattoo parlor being a hair salon under the zoning code, and felt they should be placed in the same zoning
Category.
classification.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Does that answer your concern, Mike?
Yeah.
And as you look at the zoning map for the city, it is kind of reaching out into some more outlying areas. But your explanation is valid. I think if you're thinking of hair salons, they're kind of everywhere throughout the city, and yeah, these aren't high traffic. There aren't hundreds of people getting a tattoo all at the same time, I wouldn't think.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, so I think what we will need is a motion to support recommending to the City Council that a local law be passed with respect to rezoning for what for now we'll just call tattoo parlors, although there was an understanding that we would change that description so that these places of business could be included in the zones listed on the information you've been provided, and that also we would come up for a definition for these places of business inside. So it's clear what we're approving or what council will be approving. Does that sound good to everybody?
Good.
Okay, so could I get a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
That was Jeff and then John.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's been approved. And then the last thing on the agenda was the cell tower guidelines that I think we received Saturday. Quite frankly, although I had a discussion with both Crystal and Chris, I haven't had a chance to look at them. And when I discussed this earlier with Crystal, I was suggesting that we could discuss it today and then, if necessary, either approve it at the next meeting or if we need to have a special meeting. But since we haven't really dealt with this before, I didn't want to rush this through because it's important. But I thought we could hear certainly from Chris and Crystal and anybody else who's involved as to what it is that the guidelines are and what we would be approving at some point. So I don't know who wants to go first.
Yeah, I'll just add that from a staff perspective, we agree. We think that this is very much what we were able to send you on Saturday is still a draft. In fact, there's a table that Chris had put together that still needs to get added to the draft. So this is definitely the time for discussion. We're not asking that a vote be taken today at this point. So I don't know if anyone else, Jeff or Chris, wants to give an overview, or Elliot.
I think an overview would be helpful, and then I would ask my fellows on the commission to take a look at those guidelines, unless, and maybe some of you already have. I'm kind of bogged down with school trying to start up, so I haven't been able to do it, but I think this would be a good time to have Jeff and Chris talk about it, and then if you guys have questions, bring them up right now, and then of course take a look at it and bring them up at another point. But Chris and Jeff, would you like to comment?
I think 5G is obviously coming. We've got numerous inquiries, I guess, into the city, and we're trying to get out ahead of it with some guidelines so that we don't get smothered with something we don't want. And in fact, we have the guidelines in place to assist whatever company or companies come into the city. So we've, Crystal and Chris and Larry and Elliot and myself, they've been working on this for the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks, trying to get a set of guidelines that put the new equipment in places that we can all live with, that are aesthetically pleasing as much as they possibly can be, still allow us to operate the equipment that the city and the BPU run every day, and allows us to have that type of spacing on our poles. So that's what you have in front of you. It's very new to us. I'll tell you, it seems like every week something new comes up and we have to tweak it a little bit more because, as we get deeper into the weeds on this thing. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you if you want to talk about it from a BPU perspective.
Sure. Just for everyone's awareness too, what 5G is. They're really small cell towers and they're distributed throughout the community. So instead of having a massive 80-foot or 100-foot tower up on top of hills, these are smaller antennas. They might be 1 to 2 feet tall. They mount on existing infrastructure. They're pretty low profile. You might have seen around the community, there's a couple of 4G small cell deployments already in our community. There's a couple on the north side. They're pretty unobtrusive. They're fairly small comparison to existing technologies. What's interesting about these though is because of the frequency that they use, the distance that they can travel, and the distance that they need to be from each person that they're trying to serve is much, much closer. So rather than having these macro cell towers up on top of hills around town, you're going to have lots of small, much smaller cell towers all throughout the town. So from the BPU's perspective, we're concerned about how they will be mounting to our infrastructure. They'll be most of the time probably using our wood poles throughout the neighborhoods and the residential area. And how they're utilizing that, there's a lot of FCC guidelines. The FCC has come down and basically said you have to provide them the space. So it's not like we can even ban them if we wanted to. So our goal is to try to find a way to enable the technology to give better service to our community and make sure that it's done in a safe manner for our crews and people who are working on and around the infrastructure, and also do it in a way that doesn't cause a whole bunch of other problems and make sure that we keep our community fairly aesthetically pleasing. It's probably the aesthetics are probably less of an issue in areas where they're mounting to wood poles, but there is a lot of contemplation about how they will roll out the infrastructure in the urban areas where there isn't wood poles to go mount to, where they might be mounting to buildings, or they might be adding new freestanding poles in the right of way, or they might be mounting to traffic signals. All those things we have to worry about and make sure that they're not going to damage the existing infrastructure, and that the liability is going to be taken care of, and that they're not making a mess of our nice downtown, historic downtown. So that's I think the overview of what the guidelines are attempting to achieve. In addition to the guidelines, whoever it is that wants to come in and put the cell towers in will also have to have agreements with the city if it's on a city piece of infrastructure. So if it's on a city traffic signal, they would have to have an agreement with the city to deal with how they can mount it. The city would also have to approve a permit for mounting to that infrastructure. Same thing with the BPU. If they wanted to come to mount to our wood poles, they would have to come to us with with an application. They have to have an agreement with us for the ability to mount on those poles. So the design guidelines is more the overarching, what is the total view and where's 5G going, and how do we make that work in our community? And then each entity that has infrastructure that's getting mounted to will also have separate agreements. This also could be a slight revenue source for the community because they're going to pay for attachment fees. And a lot of that's regulated by the FCC on how much you can pay and what you're allowed to charge. But there is some revenue opportunities there, so that's a good thing as well. And it also diversifies the marketplace in our community for internet service. So rather than having the only option being one company providing internet to home users or to businesses, with the rollout of fiber from another company that's just happened, and then with this potential wireless option, we might actually end up with 3 pretty competitive high-speed internet options for our community, which is awesome. So from my perspective, I'm fully in support of it. We just want to make sure that we do it in a way that keeps us in control and that enables it to roll out in a way that doesn't harm our communities from a technical and from a visual perspective.
And Chris, I think when we talked the other day, you had an estimate as to how many of these would potentially be placed in locations throughout the city.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot. I mean, it could be upwards in the thousands. It depends on how they roll them out, how many different providers, because you can also have different, there could be more if there's more providers. If one provider is just doing one layer of coverage, you could have, thousands. You're probably going to end up with one, at least probably every major block. They don't project distances very far. They don't go through trees well. They don't go through windows and doors very well in buildings. So they're going to be fairly dense, but they are fairly low profile. We've had some of they have a few towers out there that are considered micro cells in the sense that they are small cell towers in Jamestown, and we have a couple of them in the north side. To my knowledge, not a single person's asked about them. They kind of just blend into the rest of the utility landscape. Now, when you start rolling out thousands of them, they might be more noticeable. But the 5G infrastructure is actually even smaller than what you'd see on the existing poles. And at the BPU too, we're trying to come up with a way to minimize the total loading on the pole. So right now, if you look at the 4G towers on the north side, you'll see that there's down near the bottom, there's an electrical meter, there's a breaker panel, then there's the radio antenna, there's the radio controller, and that's probably the biggest part of it. And then it runs up the pole. So if we come up with a agreement, so BPU is going to be working on an agreement to deal with that, so they don't have to meter every single one, which would reduce all the stuff on the pole. And the 5G stuff, a lot of the radios now and the equipment is actually embedded in the antenna. So we'll probably end up with a lot of just small antennas sticking to the top of the poles and a power service going up to them and a fiber service connection. So, and that's the other thing too, is there's attachment opportunities to get the fiber to each of these poles. They have to run the fiber around town too. So that's also another potential revenue source for the utility.
Thanks. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that it's clear. We're not talking about recommending some giant tower. We're just talking about relatively unobtrusive attachments for the most part to existing utility poles, even though there might be thousands of them. And then also that with 5G coming down the pike, that would certainly be a welcome addition to the environment for doing business in Jamestown. We want to welcome it. And we would just be approving guidelines so that it would be as aesthetically pleasing and as unobtrusive as possible. And, there might be the side benefit of creating some revenue. So I think this is all good, but I would like us to have a chance to review the guidelines. But let me see if anybody here has any questions right now while we've got Jeff, Larry, and Chris here. And Crystal, of course.
Looked at the guidelines just really quick, and I did some questions about the height, but I was mostly thinking of freestanding poles. I thought, like you said, attaching them to the wooden poles we have already is fine. What are the height limitations or guidelines that could we see a giant freestanding pole? I mean, I know we don't want to in downtown, but I was just looking through them and it said something about it had to be a certain distance. It couldn't be higher than like the highest whatever it was, building or.
And there's a 10% higher than any pole in the same block. The maximum height of 50 feet. So in areas like, say, the urban core where you have streetlight poles and they're 12 or 15 feet tall, they're not going to be able to stick a 50-foot pole in there because of the 10% restriction. They might be able to fit a 15-foot pole in, which in reality, you probably want them above the street lighting level anyways, so they're not blocking the view. And in the downtown core too, there's probably a possibility where they would actually want to replace an existing decorative fixture with a new decorative fixture that's either taller or has the equipment embedded inside of the tube, of the hollow tube. And that's kind of what we'd be pushing for too. So that's part of the design standard is we'll approve this one, you're good to go with this version. If you want to do something else, then we'll have to go through more of a formal review process. And then for the stuff attached outside of from the wood stuff, it's 10% higher than the pole in the same block. So you got a 40-foot pole outside your house, you're not gonna go up too much taller. So it's not, they won't reach, but they do want them out at the top.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
So I guess, do they have to be, is it like line of sight for them to work?
Mostly, yeah. They will go through some small stuff, it sounds like, but it sounds like they mostly will be line of sight.
Does it matter the number of, or how much information each one can handle? Like downtown, would you need more as more people are using it?
Yeah, I think the more devices they have, the more bandwidth they'll be able to use.
Okay, so like around the ice arena, they may need a higher concentration of them to handle more bandwidth. And in residential areas, they would need less of them.
If the residential areas are using it for their phone access, but it also has the capability to provide speed broadband, so they could be fairly dense in residential neighborhoods as well.
John, did I see your hand up before, or was I hallucinating?
I don't think, I didn't mean to put it up, but I had a couple questions.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, I know with the large cell towers, there are cell phone companies that have their antennas, you'll have multiple cell phone companies on one antenna, or on one tower. If, assuming somebody puts up a freestanding small cell wireless pole, are there opportunities to put more than one carrier on there, or is it one carrier, one pole?
I think that's something that we could address in the design guideline as a recommendation. And one of the sections in there is about co-location. So maybe that's a good bullet to add, is if there's a way to build a pole that enables future expansion. I'm not sure if they're using, we'd have to look to see if they're using the same frequencies, because they might not be able to share the space. I don't know. But I think we could add a bullet to that effect in the co-location section. That's a good point.
I agree. I think any opportunity for co-location that exists, I think that's perhaps one of the standards is that is explored with each one.
Yeah, we'll have to be careful how we word it, because we probably can't require that they build infrastructure bigger to handle that, but we can encourage it somehow by making it easier if they do. Because then ultimately be private property of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
I did see the section on co-location, and that's great that, the preference is put it on the poles that we already have, and we have thousands of them, I think. Jeff will correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that with as many poles as we have in the city, to put a finer point on it, I can't imagine why we would possibly need to erect a new pole for one of these small cells, but maybe there's areas of the city where there just aren't enough utility poles, or maybe too much stuff already on some of the utility poles in some of the areas of the city. But it seems a little frightening to me, the idea of thousands of more poles going up in the city. Seems like we have a lot already, but.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see new poles in residential areas. You're not going to see them in most of the community. There's no reason for them to spend all that money putting a new pole and foundation in, plus the restrictions on what we have and the guidelines makes that even more expensive. So they're gonna mount to wood poles, but you will probably see it in the downtown. There's just no wood poles in the downtown to mount to. There's some traffic signals that might be able to get mounted to if there's space on those signals, depending on what the city's doing with their wireless build out of the traffic signals. Probably the downtown is probably the biggest place you might see them. You might see them in parks. If there's a big park where there's probably no electrical poles running through some of these big parks, you might see them pop up in a couple parks, or like maybe along the Riverwalk or something, if they really wanted to provide service in those areas. But those parks are probably going to be low on their list of places to target.
Got it. Have applications been filed already with the city for these antennas, 5G?
We don't have a process, but we are in communication with one potential provider who has shown interest.
Great.
So that's one of the reasons why this is kind of coming forward.
Got it.
And they've been interested probably about 6 months, I'd say. So if they're willing to come in and make an investment, it'd be great. We just got to make sure we get some rules in place to make that happen.
Right. Well, great job. Kudos to you guys for being out ahead of this. The last thing I wanted to mention was on page 13, there's a table 6-1, and it mentions the fourth column says note regarding area, and then there's a couple areas listed there that look like they might be from another city or something like that. I just wanted to mention that so we could adjust that and maybe mention certain parts of Jamestown. I don't know if it's areas of Albany or something like that, but we'll definitely want to look at that.
Well, that would be novel. We could tell Albany what to do instead of that. I guess I don't think we'd get away with it. It would make me happy, but.
Oh, yeah, I see the table. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, and that's a good reason for us taking a look at it in general, just to see if it's up to where we need it to be to make sure it's all done properly. So, because things happen. Are there any other questions from anyone today? Now, if after we get a chance to look at these, myself included, and we have any questions or recommendations, what would be the most efficient way to handle that? Should we just go through you, Crystal, or?
Yeah, why don't you do that, and then depending on whose section it is or who's working on what, I can filter the information, who needs to get it.
Okay.
And then once we have, like I said, there's another table or two that I think we need to add. Obviously, we've got some some additional revisions that we need to make. So we'll take another shot at vetting the document more thoroughly. But if there are any additional recommendations, please send them my way. And I think, maybe in the next, I won't give it a date. We'll get it back out to all of you again. A final draft, we'll call it.
With the potential of recommending for adoption at our September meeting?
Thoughts on that, Jeff and Elliot, in terms of like how quick is there an urgency? Or can we?
Could it wait for our regular meeting, or
do we need to have one in between?
Quicker?
I think we need to discuss that, and if we think it needs to be quicker, we can poll the commission.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll probably get the chance to approve it at the regular meeting unless we hear otherwise.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to hold this up because it looks like there's good potential for the city here.
Yeah, I think we want to get it done sooner than later, but
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, we want to make sure it's thoroughly vetted and it's ready. When we get to vote, we want it to be ready to be voted on. So why don't we aim for 2 weeks to have full revisions to the commission, and that will give you time before the next meeting to take another look and
2 weeks for you to send us what looks like a final one?
I mean, I think we need a week for
That
you
works
guys to look at it.
Yeah,
get us
back
comments
into it.
back.
yeah, we need a week to have a chance to look at it
Yep.
and see what suggestions we have.
Yep.
And then we could send them off to Crystal.
I think realistically, to give this the amount of time that it really needs, I think we need to try and stick with the next planning commission meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
terrific.
Oh, any other questions or comments? Anything else to come before the commission?
No.
If not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Lyman. Can I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Lauren. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.